let's just talk a second here about these fake riots that are going on. You're not going to probably like this video, so probably just scroll on. But for those of you who just are kind of curious about this kind of comes up, and I've been having fun with this a lot on Bird Site. I've been just kind of making fun of all of this. But let's be real for just a second here. If this were a real riot, LAPD would be nowhere near it. They would be doing what the Uvalde cops did in a serious situation. If there, I mean, let's get really serious. If there was one guy in there that actually was, looking for cover and then sniping from cover and taking out police, they would back way off. First of all, half the department would call in sick and use their sick paid leave and so forth. That's like half the department do that. Second, they would all back off into a 5-mile area, create a perimeter, and send in drones. That's the reality. They wouldn't even bother with any of this. This is all show, what they're doing. This is so that LAPD can justify its ridiculous bloated budgets. This is so that the Orange administration can justify trying to cram this big bastardized spending bill through that, like, it's just more money printing. That's all it is. Just more money printing, more give a bunch of corporations money, more give a bunch of countries money. That's all this is. Just print a bunch of fake dollars and expand the debt even further. Like, that's all. Oh, and then on top of that, throw in this Palantir thing where we're gonna just spy on every American. Like, that's all this is. That's what this whole thing is a sham. You want to have a serious conversation? Here's what would actually happen if this were a serious country. The sitting president would say, okay, if you are in fact an American and you're siding with another side that is flying the flag of a foreign country on U.S. soil, claiming that they are conquering it, that nullifies your American citizenship. That would say that you no longer want to be an American and you are now actually an enemy of the country, like directly. And same thing with Newsom, same thing with all this stuff. And that's when they would say, okay, well, that's it. Now you're an invading army. So now you're all going to go, including Americans. So you're all going to get deported back across the border. And that's it. You no longer have U.S. citizenship. You're done. That's what would happen. If Andrew Jackson were the president, that's exactly how. Actually, it'd be worse if he were president. If Andy Jackson were alive, yeah, it would not go well, right? And he himself would be there. Just that's another thing too. I mean, he was a kind of a respectable kind of guy in that sense, and he would probably be there personally, to take out the governor like himself, probably with his bare hands, like. Right? Like, this is reality. This is the reality. It's like, this is not going to be a fun conversation. This is a reality conversation. That's what would happen. Like, well, but it's wrong of this and it's wrong of that. I don't care whether something's right or wrong here. Cultures create borders. That's where they come from. They don't just come arbitrarily from the state. Sorry, loser tardians. That is not true. It's not how that works. Borders happen first because the culture decides they want to do what they want. They want self-direction. And they say, we want to have our culture here. So, look, you guys can do whatever you want on that side of the creek. We'll do what we want on our side of the creek, and we'll just leave each other alone. Downstream of that, the people create some kind of loose government, usually, to enforce said border. That's reality. And that's where that all comes from. So, yeah, when you send an invading group of people that are straight saying they're here to conquer it, it's like, okay, well, that just gets put down immediately. Under normal circumstances. So why isn't that being done? Well, let me talk to you out there for the handful of people that make it this far. The reason that's not being done is because the Orange administration and all of its minions that own it, they can't have mass deportations. I know that they virtue signal on this. They actually can't do it, though. Not because of logistics. Oh, no, logistically, they could put bounties on all of them right now, and it'd be over very quickly, about a month. About 30 days, all 50, 60 million of them would be gone very quickly. There's a lot of broke American men that would have no problem at all cashing in on that. Like none, because they're broke. And they'd like to be able to pay off their debts. And they'd like to be able to buy property. They'd like to be able to own a piece of the country that they're told is theirs. So, yeah, that wouldn't be an issue. You could solve it in about 30 days if you were being serious. He can't do that. And the reason he can't do that is because it'll collapse the dollar. And you're like, well, how is that possible? It collapses the dollar because the dollar needs cheap labor. It needs progressively cheaper and cheaper and cheaper labor so it doesn't inflate on domestic soil. Okay? I've got like hundreds of videos that I've explained this stuff. You'll get a better education, not to blow my own horn, but you'll get a better education watching any of the hundreds of videos that I've done on this than you will in any 10 different MBA classes. Because like this is all real world stuff. This is all like on the ground real world stuff, not that theoretical shit they teach in colleges or at the airport Marriott. So it would tank the dollar because then wages for domestic Americans would start increasing. And most mega corporations can't do that. They can't have wages increasing, which is why they're always wanting wages decreasing. Okay? They can't have that. And you're like, well, but small businesses, it would hurt small. No, it actually would not. It would do the opposite. Most people are not small business owners. I say this as a small business owner myself. Small businesses would be just fine. And here's why. Small businesses aren't really required to do this. Like they can do it themselves. I do all of the heavy lift, like literally all the heavy lifting in my businesses. You know, I'm the guy who does all the shit work that nobody else wants to do. All those jobs that they say, oh, Americans won't do those jobs. Yeah, I'm the guy who does those jobs, right? And that's reality. And that would be reality here in a small business sense. Big companies and big government protect each other. And big banking funds all of it. And they protect all this because it's much easier to control 1,000 or so giant mega corporations all owned by the same 3 hedge funds. It's much easier to control that than it is to try and control 50 million small businesses that, that seriously have like 1, maybe 2 people operating it. In a lot of cases, just one guy who's a small business, a guy in a truck. Like, well, but then how do we do big industry? You don't have to have big industry. That's actually a bit of a lie. There used to be lots of small, local steel mills that used to exist. And with the advent of fiat currency, that's money conjured from nothing, for those of you keeping score at home, these other companies would just keep borrowing fake money and then go buy up their competition and pay them anything that they wanted. They're like, oh, well, we'll give you a bunch of money for this. This is no different than the boomers selling off the entire country to hedge funds because, well, they're offering more money. No, they're offering you more fiat dollars. If they were actually paying in hard currency, there's no way they could pull it off. The same reason that General Motors couldn't buy Ford. You can look up that whole story. GM could not afford to buy Ford, not because they couldn't get a hold of $10 million, but because they couldn't get a hold of $8 million in gold. That's the reality. Because none of the bankers would give out that much gold. And the reason being is because they didn't have it. They had already inflated the paper gold supply to the point of insanity back then. That's why they needed to have a Federal Reserve in the first place. That came about in 1913, because they were pretty much running out of the ability to move gold around the country so it could be double, triple, quadruple, quintuple, dodeca, double counted by the same auditors, because gold is highly fungible as a result of that. Just because it's an element on the periodic table. So you can melt it down, change serial numbers and so forth. But because of that, that's what ends up happening. Is any of that making any sense at all? So as a result of that, it has to have this endless flow of cheap labor. And you either insource it from other countries or you outsource it to other countries. This is what happened during 1971 when Nixon decided to start opening relations with communist countries like China, because they're like, first of all, China needed to be propped up, and also the US needed cheap labor because the currency was falling apart. And it did. And it fell apart as a result of trying to pay for Johnson's ridiculous programs and the Vietnam War. The so-called guns and butters of the 1960s. That's exactly what happened. That's why in 1968, inflation went to 15%, minimum wage went up 15%. 69, 70, 71, every year minimum wage increased because the real rate of inflation was going up. And it finally culminated in the breakdown of the Bretton Woods Accord in 1971. And then after that, it's been all downhill. So there's your history lesson. Don't apply free market hard money principles to this nonsense economy.